designer, Wyatt Cheng.
Hi, Brandy. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Then we've got our Reddit Diablo moderator, Thunderclaw, who I believe can hear me?
Yep, hello.
Oh, there you are. And then, last but not least, we've got Chris Hinton, also known as Oft Repeated, who submitted the Witch Doctor build that you guys voted for.
It is a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. If you haven't joined us before, Theorycraft Thursday is about kind of getting together with the developers, players, and playing along, talking about the builds, and just hanging out and having fun. So without further ado, I think we're going to go ahead and jump into some Torment 3 Rifts. And if we can start off with Chris talking a little bit about the build that you submitted to Theorycraft Thursday and kind of what that's about.
Sure. So the Carnival build is based around, as anybody who's read the post knows, the mask Carnival, which causes all your fetishes to fire darts whenever you do. The rest of the build is really sort of built around enhancing that core functionality. It's a build, I would say, that the challenge isn't so much in finding all of the pieces, although that is a process, as it is just optimizing. So really, though, at the end of the day, I think what drives a lot of Carnival users is the desire to just be spamming darts all over the map and directing what your fetishes are doing.
Awesome. I think we're all playing something a little bit different, though. I think everybody's using fetish sycophants today.
Yes. All those little guys running around is super fun.
Yeah, I love having them. They're so cute.
Well, and it's worth saying... Yeah, it's worth saying with the Carnival build, I had a lot of WTF comments from people about the Theorycraft post about using both Fetish Army and Fetish Sycophants. And Carnival is one of the few builds, I think, at least for now, where that makes sense given the interaction of the two skills. But really, with a Carnival build, you just want as many darts as possible, more darts. And so... Yeah, they're going to get sick of hearing that.
That's entirely my fault. I may have overdone that a little bit.
But given that interaction, you actually can keep an army of about 15 darts up all the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're just watching them cover the sky. It's awesome.
Are there any situations that you feel all those darts work particularly well, particularly versus, say, Mask of Jerem or something like that?
Yeah, well, so I guess the advantage is you can tell your fetishes what to do. I see it as a build that solo is very challenging to play because you don't have your pets out in front of you taking the damage. But that in a party setting, as I tend to mostly play, is great. Supplementary damage, especially if you're playing with other witch doctors who have a lot of fetishes. I mean, the Carnival build tends to mitigate some of the crowding issues that we can, continue to see just by keeping your fetishes out of the way. I would say it also, the single target damage can be pretty intense, and especially if you're using Snake to the Face, which is one of the best named runes in the game. You can just about stun lock Rift Guardians with it. I had a T5 party. We hit Blood Maw on our Rift, and I was able to basically stun lock him the whole time, which saved us all a lot of pain.
Nice.
Do you yell that every time you cast it?
Yes.
Snake to the face.
The key is just to scream Snake to the Face over and over again.
I think I called that out in the blog, too. It really is. It's an excellent name.
I don't know. It's also a build that allows you potentially to use the rune for piranhas called Wave of Mutilation, which is probably a close second to Snake to the Face. And actually, I would say that's one of the more flexible skill slots in the build because, especially if you're running it with strong arm bracers, Wave of Mutilation does a very good job of knocking back a lot of trash mobs, especially, which just helps sort of move a little more quickly through the rifts.
Let's see.
I will say I have made a couple of tweaks though since I submitted the build.
Oh yeah, what have you changed?
So I think the biggest change, and one of the most interesting for me, was at the time I submitted the build, I was running zombie dogs with leeching beasts, and I think I also had one of the dog passives to go along with that, to give me an extra dog. And while the life on hit is nice, I found that what I've actually switched to works a lot better is to use the Frightening Aspect rune of Horrify, which doubles your armor for 8 seconds out of the 12-second cooldown it has. And I found that mitigation, at least for now, seems to be a lot more resilient than relying on the dogs to fill your health bar back up. So, you know, I've been running about 9 million base toughness, and that jumps up to 14 to 15 when I use Frightening Aspect, and that tends to be enough. I think with 2.1 and the enhancement of life on hit, I suspect Leeching Beast may make a play to be, you know, the go-to skill in that slot. But
are you using a Fierce Loyalty as one of your passives as well?
I'm not, actually. What I switched to, since I'm not using dogs currently, I guess I don't really have any of the pet passives. What I've been using instead, because my big problem is really toughness. In a Carnival build, you pretty much have to stand still to deliver damage.
Yeah.
And that makes avoiding a lot of affixes a little trickier if you're going to keep your DPS up. So I've actually been focusing on some toughness related. I think I swapped my dog passive for Jungle Fortitude.
Right, yeah, sure.
No Grave Injustice?
You know, that has been a point of debate among us Carnival users. I have to give a shout out to Salamander, who's the other guy in our forums that really promotes the build, and he and we've run a few rifts together, and we're always tossing ideas around, but we've debated about Grave Injustice because it's such an awesome passive in just about any build. The trick is, with a Zunimasa set-based build, you can't run a Thing of the Deep, and so without that massive pickup radius, what I found is that the effect of Grave Injustice doesn't get proc nearly as much since you're standing at range.
Right. So what do you fill it with? Gruesome Feast?
Let's see, what did we get? I'll tell you guys what I'm running now. So I have Fetish Sycophants, Gruesome Feast, Jungle Fortitude, and Pierce the Veil. So yes, Gruesome Feast is, that's the skill that just, when you hit multiple elite packs especially, and you can mow down the first half of them and pick up a few health globes and really bump that DPS, you start to feel very powerful.
Well, I know you were super excited about talking a little bit about what you wanted to see with this particular build in 2.1. Can you tell us about
absolutely. Well, I've been talking to a lot of other Carnival users, and where the Carnival build currently sits is that, you know, even with optimal gear, which I've pretty much geared into, you're really going to top out, I would say, at the low end of Torment 6. You can do it, but it's very slow. I have heard of a couple people running hybrid Tall Man's Finger Carnival builds without the Zunimasa set, which I'm interested in, and they may have a little better luck. But given that, you tend to lose out as a Carnival user in the efficiency argument, especially with users of a more typical Mask of Jerem, Tasker, and Theo setup. So we've been talking a lot about ways that you can improve Carnival to keep it competitive with greater rifts especially, and that emphasis on efficiency that's going to come with those. And I think the number one improvement would be to either change Carnival itself or create a legendary item that causes your fetishes to use your same rune for Poison Dart. And especially with a couple tweaks to Poison Dart giving us more elemental options, it would actually open up the possibility of doing like a Fire Carnival build with Wrathful Protector and a Tall Man's Finger and a Fire Dog. That's just one hypothetical, but that would actually add some damage because the other Poison Dart runes do more. But it would enable you to choose between Cold or Splinters or Flaming Dart.
Yeah, that's definitely sort of interesting. We've been, you guys have probably seen that we've been going through the skills and picking various instances where we kind of look at supporting that elemental diversity, and your Poison Dart example is a great one. We probably wouldn't do that by adding a new legendary item, because that legendary item, I mean, if it's basically like, if your fetishes shoot poison darts, they shoot the same one as you, wouldn't make sense, because there's really only one legendary that does that. So
you're right.
That seems like something that we'd probably just want to look at baking into the base behavior.
my thinking about if there is some enhancement, there are other enhancements I think to Carnival that could be made, but if there were a slot for it, I think it would have to be the gloves, because with a typical pet build you have Tasker and Theo in the glove slot, and that's like the obvious best in slot item. But with a Carnival build, you really don't. A good set of trifecta gloves is about the best you can do.
Right, because they're poison darting at the same speed as you, right?
Exactly. So that's one of the overlooked advantages of Carnival, in that you can stack attack speed, and your fetishes are going to attack quite a bit faster, even than melee fetishes with a Tasker and Theo. So the glove slot is kind of the odd slot out. What I've actually been doing to take advantage of it is running the Ashira's gloves and shoulders, which give you a nice toughness boost.
Right.
And then that leaves the bracer slot open to switch from Augilds to strong armed. So you can make it work, and I've seen, if you weren't running the Zunimasa variation of the build, you could also, maybe take advantage of the Kane's boots and gloves, for instance, for a little attack speed. But
swapping into strong arm for the knockback damage. I mean, do you have a knock? Oh, I guess you were talking about Wave of Mutilation, right? Is that okay?
It would really be either Piranado or Wave of Mutilation would be your choices for that.
Right. That totally makes sense.
And I will say, since especially, I think certain elites and Rift Guardians can't be knocked back, it's really a bonus for kind of clearing the trash. I will say the other slot that you have a lot of possibilities with is a belt slot. I've been running a Harrington Waistguard for a while now because I love the rush of doubling my damage and seeing 25 million dart crits. You start getting BBV and Harrington and seeing crits in the upper 20 millions on your darts, and it feels pretty good and stuff melts. But, for a little more, if you're in a Rift that doesn't have a lot of clickables or coming up with greater rifts, I think something like a Witching Hour or a Hellcat Waistguard is going to be a better choice.
Cool.
But, one other tweak to the mechanics of the build that I think might actually enhance it in a subtle way is that currently, if you're using Fetish Army, one reason to use Fetish Army instead of just the Fetish Sycophants is that the dart damage benefits from the Fetish Army skill. And what will what actually might enhance the build and improve the focus on Poison Dart is to switch it so that when you're darting, the dart damage is improved by Poison Dart skill bonuses for both the Fetish Sycophants and the Fetish Army. That would have the effect of I think sort of leveling the choices between Sycophants and Army a little bit. But it would also, it would enable your darts to do a little more damage too.
We've definitely we've had a few requests, both because Sycophants has become such a key part of many Witch Doctor builds. People want a way to influence the elemental damage, but there's not really a good way to do that. Like, I don't want to create too strong of an association between Fetish Army and Fetish Sycophants, since so many people do run Sycophants on their own.
Right.
There's been one suggestion to do something like what we do with Archon, where we just kind of take a look at your gear, and the Sycophants benefit from whatever the highest is. Some people actually like that it just has one. Like, actually, no, Sycophants is a physical thing, and if you want to take advantage of it, do physical, and that's interesting in its own way. So there's definitely some disagreement internally about the right way to go. But one thing that does seem to come up a lot, and is probably a universal win, is to see if we can figure out a way, well, I shouldn't say figure out a way, but to make the Sycophants benefit from your plus Fetish Army damage, like you were saying.
Oh, interesting. Well, I suppose that would solve the problem for Carnival too. I know with Carnival builds, the way that I have to give huge props to Paul over on the Witch Doctor forums, because he's done extensive testing of all the different mechanics, so we can try and figure out how to optimize our builds. And he actually has some questions that I'm sure he would love to get a blue comment on. But, I promised him I would bring it up, but what we've been looking at is the way that you can, through elemental and skill damage, optimize the Carnival build. And what we've found...
I died.
Here we go, Alresia.
Yep, there it was. That was just...
We got the obligatory death.
Yep, there it was. It wasn't to a Death Maiden this time, though, which was super embarrassing last time.
Or maybe super appropriate.
Or appropriate. I really haven't decided yet. Sorry to
But
derail you with that.
No, that's fine. So anyways, long story short, what we found is that because the damage calculation for the poison darts is a little different than other skills, it would be interesting if there's some way to make poison dart damage factor into that. And then you've got a build that really focuses around stacking that. At the same time, a lot of people right now are stacking zombie dog damage because the Tall Man's Finger is such an amazing item.
Yeah. Have you played around with Tall Man's Finger?
I have.
You alluded to it earlier of like integrating a Tall Man's Finger into your current build. Did you actually try that out?
Yeah, I had. Well, so this is the thing that that is on my agenda next. Is I think all of us Carnival users have really nailed down the Zuni Masa set-based Karn builds, and we've occasionally seen people pop up saying, I don't run the Zuni set. Instead, I use a different gear setup that allows me to run, when you're not using the Zuni set, you don't need Ring of Royal Grandeur, which allows you then to run a Stone of Jordan and a Tall Man's Finger, and that's a very powerful combo. So that's the next horizon for me is to play around with that. But I have tried, because with a Carnival build currently, you're really geared for poison and fetish army damage. You're only a Mask of Jerem and Tasker and Theo away from from a poison-based pet build, and so I've definitely done that swap a couple of times, and definitely using the Tall Man's Finger with the, with the poison damage and just getting that giant dog out has been really pretty impressive. I think deep down I'm a poison guy. I know there are fire builds, and I think a Cold Witch Doctor builds are pretty awesome, but at the end of the day.
Well, that's like the Witch Doctor specialty, right?
You think it is. I will say that Carnival is the most, firing the darts is probably the most fun I've had since I was turning entire rooms full of monster corpses into spaghetti sauce with Corpse Explosion in Diablo 2. So that is, so it's on par, and I just feel like it inherits from the Necromancer a little bit of a poison emphasis.
Nice. Your comments on the Tall Man's Finger earlier actually remind me of something I wanted to mention, which was there's a little bit of a fun history there behind rings and legendaries. We talk a lot about how we wish rings were stronger. Now everyone says, "Oh, Royal Ring of Grandeur is the mandatory ring or whatever," and originally, the intent was that and this is the intent for all slots, is that there's a menu of choices available to you, right? Like there's not supposed to be the one mandatory ring. There's supposed to be a lot of interesting trade-offs,
right?
And it's interesting that you mentioned like the Stone of Jordan, and then and people actually do forego it. So it's nice to see that worked out. That was sort of an experiment for us. We had a long discussion about like how strong should the Tall Man's Finger be if we're going to buff it, right? And we said, well, can we make it strong enough to compete with Stone of Jordan and Royal Ring of Grandeur? And it was like, well, let's try to like push those limits a little bit, and if it works out and we like it, then let's go ahead and start making more rings. So the hope is that this is just the beginning. It was an experiment, and like ideally back during Reaper of Souls beta, I don't know if people remember the immunity necks used to have their effect on rings, and they were actually immunity rings. And we said, you know what, we don't really want you to be able to become immune to two elements
I see.
At the time too easily. So we moved them onto the neck, but then there's a lot of competing things there, and you're trying to complete your set or whatever. And some people will use those, and that's cool. But that actually left kind of a void in terms of desirable rings. So hopefully, over time, we'll be able to add some really compelling ring choices.
Well, and I will say, you mentioned the amulets. That's, I think, one of the most interesting, one of the widest open slots, because, I'm running a Haunt of Vaxo at the moment because it happens to be a bifecta with poison damage. If I could find a sufficiently good immunity amulet of any kind, I would swap to that. But, it's the effects on the different amulets just kind of become these bonuses that sweeten your build without sort of determining it.
Interesting.
Maybe some more set rings for the class sets, because right now only Natalia's has the set ring.
Possibly. I mean, that's definitely one way to do it. There's a lot of like sets are interesting because it allows us to obviously there's the collection aspect to it. It also allows us to make you have like exclusive choices between various very strong powers. and then but then a ring like like the Tall Man's Finger can complement a lot of existing builds without necessarily having to be a build on its own. So that's kind of like the push and pull of sets versus just an individual item.
Right.
Like the look socks for the Earthquake build.
Yeah, and I was talking to John Yang the other day, and we were talking about the Demon Hunter builds and different Demon Hunter options, and he was talking about how a lot of people Reign of Vengeance might not be strong enough, but rather than buff Reign of Vengeance, we could introduce Reign of Vengeance oriented legendary items, so that when you combine it with the set, then those are actually multiplying by each other, and that might be actually like a really sexy and attractive way to go.
Yeah. Well, and you look at some of the builds, for instance, that are most popular right now, and they've really hit that nail on the head. I'm a Carnival fan fundamentally, but I have played my Jade Dot quite a bit, and you look at that set and the way that you can combine the set with the Ring of Royal Grandeur and Quetzalcoatl and certain skill choices, and you get a very powerful build that has a very distinct playstyle that forces you to make choices. You're just not, if you can't one-shot it, your efficiency is going to go down quite a bit, and you're going to be pretty squishy compared to a pet build. So I find that that's those builds are often seen as the most popular because they're just they're so efficient. But I really think that in the end it's because you have a lot of these pieces that can be put together.
Yeah, I mean definitely the Harvester Quetzalcoatl combo. Like you have to get right in the middle of the enemies, which can be pretty stressful sometimes.
Oh, it's really an art to sync that all up. I'm just so used to
I think I just
firing
lost
my
audio.
poison darts.
Oh, did you lose audio?
I can't hear anything in my
Can't hear
ear.
anybody right now? Okay. We'll see if we can get that back for you.
But actually, this might be a good opportunity while we're getting that audio back to mention one of the quirks with the build that you'll find with Carnival. It's obvious with a Carnival build that changes in level are going to be a little challenging, and Waller Elites especially, because your fetishes are so short that those darts will just get interrupted. But one other glitch that still happens is that if they get crowd controlled, especially frozen, the fetishes will stop firing darts afterwards, and you often have to
completely
spirit.
dead very suddenly.
I can hear him. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I can hear him too.
All right, we've got Tech in here working on it.
So anyway, to make a long story short, if your fetishes get frozen or crowd controlled, there are a couple of ways to bring them back. You can spirit walk away and let them teleport to you, and that seems to fix it. Or you can just resummon them, particularly if you have a Star Metal Kukri. But I will say, one of the items I didn't include in my submitted build that I should have as just a helpful extra is a bottomless potion of Kool-Aid, which is awesome when you're duking it out with a Waller Elite and you can clear the way for some more darts to get through.
All right, you're able to hear again?
I can hear again.
Awesome.
I think I'm
All right.
back live. Thank you very much.
Cool, we are all
What'd I miss?
set.
So I was just talking a little bit about there's currently a glitch that causes the fetishes to stop firing darts if they get crowd controlled, and I was talking about a couple of ways to avoid or mitigate that when it happens.
Gotcha.
We actually had a debate on the forums about, is it optimal to leave them in melee mode until the fight's over, or to recast them, and you could start breaking down the numbers of the melee damage versus the dart damage. It gets pretty funny.
Interesting. That sounds pretty hard to theorycraft out.
Well, like I said, we got Paul on our forum, and he's just like, they're in there counting frames to figure out attack speeds of skills and optimizing. That's playing at a level that I'm not sure I'll ever reach. It's very high.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, really quick comment, because I know people will want to know this, even though like I love talking about the Witch Doctor, but we did change the Rift progression algorithm. There's been some questions about this because we hit the end stone just now, and so I thought I'd just mention that on PTR 2.1, in case people don't know, the progression is now based on the experience value of the monsters. And that has resulted in a few side effects. People have been mentioning that sometimes you get on PTR, you get to the end of the rift, and there's not enough monsters and stuff. And we're definitely aware of those issues and looking at all of those. It's we consider it a bug. I mean, if you fully clear a rift and it's not complete, that's just straight up an artifact of being on PTR, and it's because we did change the algorithm. Because we want it to be that you're not like skipping certain kinds of monsters or like hordes of small monsters is better. It should just be, you know, kill different types of populations, and there's definitely a big focus on making sure different random populations are all equally all progress the bar in equal amount for something as competitive as tiered rifts. Just thought I'd mention that. Well, since it came up just now on to us.
Have you tested your Carnival build on the PTR with the Greater Rifts?
You know, I have not yet. I downloaded the PTR, and that took a couple of days, and then I got so busy fine-tuning for this stream today that I haven't gone in and done it. But I definitely am going to, because people have started throwing around numbers about their Greater Rift levels and where they sort of top out. And it would be really interesting to know. I think as with Torment 6 in the Greater Rifts, I think what we're going to find with Carnival as they currently exist is that I don't think the limitation is DPS so much as it's delivering that DPS consistently because of the level obstacles and because of the need to stand still to deliver that damage. I think toughness ends up being more of a challenge. At least it's felt that way to me.
Absolutely. You know what? You're touching on something I have a lot of passion for, which is like people. Like if you looked at a lot of just the casual comments about a year ago, people get very focused on their DPS number on their character sheet. And we've always been sort of like trying to move people away from that and say, hey, you know, that DPS number in your character sheet, that's just kind of a rough guideline. But if you really know what you're doing, you're going to break that down and take in a lot of those intangibles, right? Like the toughness and the pathability, or like how much can you burst versus not. And that DPS number just doesn't tell the whole story. And one of the things that tiered rifts will really show is how much all of those intangibles really matters to your overall effectiveness.
Oh, I got an amulet during that run.
Ooh.
It is it's the Dead Mass one.
You know, that's an amulet that has so much potential, and you'd think with a star metal kukri it could be just amazing, but what I found in testing it is that it doesn't apply to enough enemies, especially the higher level ones. It's a hilarious effect, though.
Yeah, it really is. I might actually use it just because that's one of my weak slots right now.
There you go. Yeah.
So,
well, and if it's got good enough roll, well, you know.
It's okay. I'm gonna put it in my stash, and we will reevaluate that at a later point in time.
Yeah.
What actually motivated the creation of the Dead Mouse amulet?
They have to have a super fan somewhere on staff, right?
Yeah, I mean,
He's actually a really big Diablo fan.
yeah.
Is he really?
Yeah, he is.
He's a really big Diablo.
I think he basically gave us little shout outs first. That was kind of nice, and we're like, yeah. I don't know if you follow EDM, electronic dance music, much, but there's some achievements that are subtle references to...
I've noticed.
Okay.
I have noticed.
Raise your weapon.
Yeah.
A lot of the barbarian ones.
Well, Lyra is going to tell the story of the Dead Mouse amulet, it looks like, in chat. But I think she accidentally a word. Oh, no, okay. That was a can you. She wants to know the story, too.
I am not the best person to tell this story. Don Vu would be the best person to tell this story.
Okay.
He put the love, sweat, and tears into making that amulet. There was actually some technical challenges that we encountered because it's the only legendary item which rolls a different legendary effect based on your class.
Right.
And that actually, you know, like we have smart rolling for like strength and int, but we were kind of sitting there like, man, how are we going to get this, have a different effect per class? And we're like, oh, I guess we can't do that. We actually shelved the idea for a while, and then Don said, and he kind of like described this way he thought he could do it with the tech that we had, and then put it in, and a couple days later it was ready to go. So
wow,
it's all the credit goes to him.
There we go.
That was quite tough.
Yeah, that was actually pretty hairy there for a minute.
Sorry, I wandered off and was attacking some random elite to the southeast.
Well, actually, that group was a good example. When you have frozen and thunderstorm and things, it can be really hard to avoid those affixes while you're standing still.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there we go. My apologies. For some reason, that webcam likes to go off kilter.
Oh, let's not walk into the molten as it's exploding. I've died enough times already.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
yeah.
need to die to that. Looks like Lylira is sharing some of the other details of the amulet that she knows about in chat. But chat's scrolling too quickly for me to read, so...
You'll have to get that later.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm about at peak fetishes at the moment, and these cemetery rifts tend to be great for showing off all those dark.
Yeah, because you have a nice narrow hallways you can fire down, so...
Mm-hmm. Well, and a lot of the objects in the that block the map don't really block the projectiles for whatever reason.
Oh, yeah. It's a little bit less collision than like on the prison or...
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's an interesting balance, because wide open areas are where you're most likely to get surrounded and ambushed, and without, with limited crowd control options in a Carnival build, that can be tricky. But on the other hand, the wide open maps let you deliver your damage the most effortlessly, so... I actually don't mind the way that the darts interact with the environment, because to me it's just this build's particular challenge, and it takes an active play style to get around it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you don't necessarily like you said. The Carnival build takes the fetishes, which normally you don't have control over, and gives you control over them. Which part of that is also the responsibility for being aware of your positioning.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's actually Salamander, my Karn buddy, actually pointed something funny out to me, which is with a Carnival build on say a jail level or a keep depths rift, you can actually run into a room, drop your fetish army, run out, and fire, and they will stay in the room and fire at things.
That's awesome.
So under certain circumstances, you can get little remote. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like you're flying these little remote drones that are doing the shooting for you. That's great. I love it.
Well, it also, you don't have to wait for them to clean up trash either. If you see that last elite wandering off in the corner, you can just hose them.
Alright.
There we. Uh-oh.
Oh, that became real dangerous real fast.
I have died moments after picking up one of those shrines for that very reason.
My Warzekian wrist guards are very handy right now, provided I don't die in the process.
Very nice.
Oh, Rift Guardian's at me.
Ah, okay. Over to your direction.
Oh, and the conduit just ended.
Oh.
So Wyatt, tell me one thing I'm just dying to know. So
Sure.
if you guys think about sort of changing the baked-in functionality of that Carnival mask, is that something that I'm going to need to go farm myself a new mask for, or can you bake that into the one I already have?
If we made it so that it inherited the elemental, you mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for instance, if you were to change the mask so that they got your rune.
So a lot of times when it comes to retro, the general rule of thumb for us is that we try to not modify existing items that you own when possible. But we're also not against making changes that are still within the spirit of what it was.
I
that
see.
feels like a change that we would just retro the behavior. I think what we try to avoid is situations where people, I don't know, feel like that we actually made the item worse for them. And if there's any possibility that we might have made the item worse for you, then we leave the old one around and start dropping a new one, right? So
well, guys, we just had something happen that is remarkably appropriate, which is that a Carnival mask dropped.
Oh, nice.
So if anybody would like that, it's there for the taking.
Do we have a slash roll or something?
No, we don't.
You guys, you know, if you want, I will think of a number between 1 and 100, and whoever's closest can take it.
That seems fair. Does that seem fair to everybody?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. I got a number.
50.
33.
10.
95 it was.
Oh, Wyatt gets it then.
Yeah. There you go.
Call.
Actually,
That's
I got my second bottomless potion. I was pretty excited.
Oh, nice. Which one was it?
It was the life on kill one, mutilation.
I think I have about 3 or 4 of them now. Is it set so that you don't get duplicates of those, or can you?
You know, I don't know the answers to that off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the data to know.
I guess I've been lucky.
Oh, for
and
the
not-
gems?
For
no.
the bottomless potions.
Oh, I don't know. No, I know folks can get more than one.
Okay.
The
Well,
ones
then
that
I've
they
just been
have.
lucky. I think I've dropped 4 different ones over
Yeah.
the last couple of months.
I remember on one of the other streams that we had, Archon kept getting multiples of the same one that he had, and he kept dropping them, but he couldn't trade his old ones.
Oh.
So he kept dropping, and that was before we made them able to be traded, right? I don't think are they able to be traded right now?
Bottomless potions? No.
No. They're BOA when they drop. So
Well,
he kept
they're tradable within game.
within 2 hours, right?
Yeah, I mean that still work. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I think that
Sorry,
wasn't
that's what you
wasn't
meant.
true for a while, right? I think
Yeah, you can trade them
Yeah.
within game.
you can trade them within game, but he kept dropping the ones that he couldn't trade, and so they were sitting in town, and we're like, well, why are all these legendaries sitting in the middle of the town? Chat was going crazy about it too.
Sometimes when I settle down for a long session of Rifts, I'll just drop all of my legendaries until the end, so the town just fills up with beams. It's rather beautiful, especially since, in comparison to the days before the anniversary buff became permanent. So actually, one thing I'd like to say a little bit about is about the progression through a Carnival build as you find your gear.
Sure.
Because I know a lot of people saw Star Metal Kukri as a recommended item in the post and said, well, I'm never going to find that. This build just won't work for me.
Right, yeah, that's really rare.
Yeah, it is. And I'm one of the guys, the jerks who got lucky and dropped one the week after Reaper of Souls came out. And mine was above 2200 DPS too. So,
Wow, you jerk.
I know. So I've been fortunate, but actually, really the only thing you need to get started is the Carnival mask. I will say, a Star Metal Kukri makes it easier, but it makes every build easier.
Right, it really
if you're
does.
a Witch Doctor, it's one of those premium items that you can just farm for because whatever you're using, it's going to work. But I would say the thing that's starting with once you have the Carnival mask, I'd say the next thing to direct your attention to or to hope for is probably the Zuni Mosses set, because that will give you that keeps those fetishes up permanently in a way that that you won't get. It makes Fetish Army a viable choice instead of using Sycophants, and it guarantees a damage output. Beyond that, the SMK adds, a much faster cooldown, obviously, on Big Bad Voodoo and your Fetish Army, and so that helps if you need to reposition them, for instance, and just amps your damage up to 11 anyway, which is great. But I will say that I'm actually kind of interested in the hearing more from people who are running it without an SMK, because I've heard from some people who run it with a Thunder Fury, for instance, and love that. And they might run it with the Zuni, that you pretty much have to run it with the Zuni set if you don't run the SMK. But having an SMK, that opens up the possibility, like I said earlier, that I'm interested in exploring, of trying it with Fetish Sycophants only, and using that Fetish Army skill slot maybe for a Tall Man's Finger and a dog. you know, before I actually got my SMK long before I finished my Zunimasa set, and so for the longest time I was running in a situation where I was depending on the fetish army to replenish its cooldown prior to running out. Right. And you know, you'd hit situations in low density rifts where you just didn't do it, and then you're on cooldown and you have no fetishes to reduce the cooldown through your SMK, and so that can be pretty limiting. But I think you know, now that I've tried it a bit longer, I think with fetish sycophants, if you can get to that 15 fetish cap, you actually can reduce the cooldown in just 3 or 4 seconds even, just because, you know, unlike waiting for your fetishes to hit on your own, with a Starmental Kukri and Carnival, you're forcing them to do it a lot faster. And I was playing a rift with 2 other SMK Carnival users, and we had, I think, a dozen big bad voodoos up at once, just because you can reduce that cooldown so fast. So it's an item that synergizes great with the build for sure, but even if you don't have it, you know, it's still possible to play this. I think we tend to underestimate the amount of time, you know, when we're theory crafting, people always try to optimize for T6, and when the reality is with any character you're going to spend a lot of time working your way up from T1.
Yeah, you know, that's one of the things I really enjoy about all the legendaries being soulbound and the auction house being removed is, like, different people take different paths through their gearing, right? Like, Kadala is nice to, if you really want an item, then you can focus on that slot and get it. But for the most part, like, I've had so many stories from different people where they go, well, I was thinking of doing this, but then, you know, I got my, you know, Zunimasas or whatever, and so I started building this way, and it makes your build feel so much more personal. And as we, you know, start to have been on this live environment now for months, and people are starting to get, you know, the build that they actually wanted, and everyone kind of took a different path to get there because of the drops. And early on there was some concern, like, well, what if I just want this build, you know? Like, why are you making me get the drops? And then afterwards we realized, actually, it's really cool to feel like you took your own path and you adapted to what you got. And sometimes it's even like the plus 15% fetish army skill, I mean, on a yellow item might actually cause that to happen to you. And I'm looking forward personally to just like experiencing that again in seasons, which I know isn't on PTR yet, and we talk about, but I think a lot of people can imagine what that's going to be like. And sometimes it's easy. Yeah, it's easy to forget how fun it is to modify the path. Like if you play a Witch Doctor again in seasons, you're probably not going to take the same route that you did this time, because you're going to have something drop for you, and it's gonna you have a Renho flare drop, and you're gonna be like, I'm making this awesome toad build. Yeah.
Well, I will say one of the builds I've also, you know, back before Reaper of Souls, I was playing a Proctor Witch Doctor build with a Scorn and Acid Rain to, you know, proc ridiculous amounts of life on hit and all that. But I will say one of the builds that I'm interested to work with is, it feels like there ought to be synergy between a Star Metal Kukri with the Rain Dance rune to provide semi-unlimited mana for short periods of time, which you can actually use to deliver crazy amounts of bears or Acid Rain. You know, really use some of those high mana spenders more than you would otherwise. And I haven't quite found the magic formula yet, but you know, in that case, you're really using your fetishes to recharge your mana battery, and that's kind of an interesting hybrid build for me, at least.
I've got a question. There's a weapon that spawns fetishes when you attack.
Yes.
Don't remember that dagger.
The Gidbin.
Gibden.
So how does that play around? Does it let you like switch out fetish army or fetish sycophant?
So I love the Gidbin as a Diablo 2 reference. However, I think the functionality, that's a little odd, because the Gidbin fetishes themselves currently are weaker than the other fetishes. They die very easily and don't deal as much damage. And as a result, they also don't fire darts, unfortunately. So I had a lot of people post, you know, maybe if that item gets tweaked in the future, that would be a great improvement to it. But, you know, in theory, it could open up a lot of avenues, especially if it was well rolled enough. It'd be a compelling alternative until you have that SMK, or even maybe once you do, depending on the rolls.
You know, I hadn't given that enough thought. I'm glad that you brought that up. I'm gonna have to make a mental note to take a look at that.
Definitely do that.
That seems very reasonable. I love whenever there's these little interactions between the different things, and that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, it allows you. Yeah, it gets you another either passive or slot or another skill slot.
Right.
I got one of those the other day.
Yeah.
So I have it sitting around.
Yeah, I have one of every legendary and set item for Witch Doctors I've been saving in my stash just in case.
Wow.
It took me a long time to do that. Actually, the last item for me to fall was because I got lucky, I'm a jerk, I have an SMK. It was the Tasker and Theo, which of course is another super rare item, but I dropped mine running bounties like last week, so I'm really starting to get into that straight pet build a little bit.
All right, let's see.
All right, let's see. I had.
Oh, I'm saving mine till the end.
Oh, saving your legendaries till the end?
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah. I've been
Every time
dumping them in my stash, so.
See,
I
I had
don't know that I'm getting all the drops on stream again. I haven't heard anybody else say anything, so I don't know.
I dropped a Spider Queen's Grasp, if anything like that. And a Stalgard's Decimator with Intelligence, which I will salvage.
That doesn't look half bad.
We've got another one.
That's actually the one I use for my transmog. It goes great with a golden die look, just an FYI.
You know, it's funny
So-
when I look at all the pieces that go into the Witch Doctor, and there's so many components and like the everything we've been talking about. I think about all the different sources of the ideas and how it really does come from the whole team. Like, I'm trying to remember who suggested the idea of the fetishes shooting the poison
A
darts.
genius.
But we have these brainstorm meetings internally where anybody on the team, and we just have a full gamut of producers and artists and animators and programmers and designers who get into a room together, and we just start jamming on legendary ideas, and then usually people the rules of brainstorming, I don't know, is that there are no bad ideas, and so you end up with these like crazy ideas out there, and usually we end up with way like a ton of impractical or not very good ideas, but then we also get like some really fantastic nuggets. And we always start with the fantasy when we can, and I remember when someone said, hey, we should shoot poison darts on your fetishes. Everyone was just kind of like, yeah, that's awesome.
Well, if you can send me that person's name, I will build a statue of them.
I honestly don't remember. Like, it's very collaborative on the team.
Now, if any of the staff are listening to this stream, they're saying, it was me, you jerk. I did it. But
it's funny. There's like, for example, there's a misconception out there. It's really our fault, right? Because we were once doing a Q&A session, and we put names on classes, and that was kind of a mistake in retrospect, because now everyone thinks that everything on the monk and wizard is Dawn, and everything on the witch doctor is me, and stuff like that. And that's really not the case. Like, everything is collaborative among the team. The names was just like, here's who can answer questions about that class at this Q&A session on this date, which was like way back in March, right? And like right now, like Dawn actually is doing a lot of Crusader work, and John is doing Witch Doctor work. Like, I think a lot of people have been requesting that your fetish counts have a portrait.
yes. Oh, please.
And John Yang's been championing that. And he's looking into that and stuff like that. Like, everything is it's very collaborative. We do have at any point in time a point person who is responsible for like keeping track of all the issues and making sure like the bugs with that class are eventually getting fixed and stuff like that. Like there's a bug for when you summon your fetish army and it kills all your sycophants, and everyone's really annoyed by that. So like that bug's on me right now. I'm responsible for fixing that. So that's just an example of how like John's looking at portraits, but I'm looking at that bug, and it's all a team effort. So. And like I said, the legendary ideas come from the whole team, artists and programmers and producers, everyone. So.
I lasted so long running around.
Well, that is great to hear. I know. I've been, obviously you guys have a lot on your hands with the PTR and getting those changes up. I think a couple of people we're starting to get a little antsy about some of those changes for 2.1 that you just mentioned. So I'm sure they'll be glad to hear that news.
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember, and this is it's hard because we all want everything to be fixed right away, but
Now.
yeah, exactly. Is we are very committed to working and supporting the game, and I hope that our patch history shows that. Like, if it doesn't get fixed this patch, it'll get fixed next. And there's some things that people asked for like 10 months ago, and a good example is everyone was like, well, when I have a death in hardcore, I would like that to get announced to clan.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, so
I
we
saw that on the notes today.
yeah, and we tried to get that in for the last patch, except there was a couple issues, and clans were, still had some other priorities, like, just other. Anyway, I can't go into details, but we prioritize everything and try to get it in. But we're like, you know what? That's a great idea. We should totally do that. And here it is, right? Like, we just keep working on the game and keep trying to make it as good as we can.
Right.
Speaking of
Well,
hardcore,
I wonder-
have you
Oh, yeah, go
run
ahead.
this Carnival build on hardcore?
I haven't, so I'm a wimp in that I've always played softcore, but in the last couple of months I got so interested in the Crusader class. I think a lot of my Witch Doctor compatriots are too. I think everybody's just rolling Crusaders right now, but that I started my first hardcore character as a Crusader because I'm like, all right, I need a guy with a big shield. That's gonna be. I'm not used to this, so I haven't tried it yet. My hunch would be that it would be a very tough build to work at high difficulty levels, just because
You're standing
you're
on
very.
plates.
Yeah, you're standing in one place. You don't have a lot of, with the current build, you really don't have a lot of body blocks from dogs or gargantuans or fetishes. So I would say it would be tough. Now, I'm sure there's somebody out there who's done it and is, no problem. But for me, that's still on the horizon.
Yeah. The pet builds, like the standard one, is probably way more safe.
It is, yeah. You've got all those out in front of you. In fact, what's interesting is because your fetishes physically stop moving, there's a little lag of them picking back up after you stop firing, and so they will just about always be behind you. And so, yeah, they're not going to block any damage. They also, because you're telling them what to do, they'll ignore a mob right next to them, because you're telling them to fire across the screen, so.
Right.
It's actually can be a little funny when I've got one skeleton wandering up and trying to poke my fetishes, and it's like, your time will come soon enough.
Wait in line. Others
Exactly.
will be first.
So Wyatt, I wonder, you don't remember who came up for the idea for the Carnival mask. I wonder if you remember anything about the art design of that.
Yeah, you run that transmog, right?
The art and design.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have a great team of concept artists, and it's funny because everything happens at the same time, and sometimes we don't know what all the effects are going to be at the time that we made it. And that's actually one of the tricky things about game development is you have artists who want to make art, and you have designers, who are designing things, and programmers who are like making it all work, except ideally, the designers would know what they wanted in advance. The art would already be done, and the code would always be perfect. But there's always bugs. Designers never know what they actually want, and they're constantly iterating and changing their mind. And art takes time to produce. And so what happens is for example, we might have a legendary item coming out in, say, November. Well, that art actually needs to be made right now.
Yeah.
Except we don't know what it's going to be yet. So we might be able to say something like, "Oh, it's going to be, a helm," and they might be like, "Oh, well, can you tell us anything about it?" And we're like, "Oh," and we have to try and anticipate the kind of things that we might want to see, and usually that has to do with fantasy. So for the Carnival, it might have been something like, "Well, we might do something tribal, or we might do something with dots, and we kind of want to do something with pets," and then they kind of do their best to try and take some of those concepts, and then afterwards we hook up the effects to the art as best as we can, and sometimes it works out better than others. Sometimes we have an effect idea, and then it turns out that the idea was a bad one, and the effect isn't as strong as we wanted, or the gameplay style isn't as good, so then we have to design a new effect. But then we'll still use the same art, and a lot of times it works out pretty well. But that's definitely one of the challenges.
Right.
The Witch
Well,
Doctor
yeah.
transmogs are the best.
Oh, I think, Mask of Jerem's a powerful item, but for my money, it just looks weird. So
Yeah.
I'm going to go with a Carnival transmog. But the one thing I love about that Carnival is without dyeing it, it's like 4 or 5 colors. It's just gorgeous, really well done. But with golden dye, which is what I always run on it, you get this glorious two-tone gold effect. That's pretty nice.
We have about 5 minutes left. Do we want to go through all the stuff that we found today?
Sure.
Because I don't know that we have enough time for another rift.
Mm-mm.
Ooh, 250.
We can go through what we found. Let's see.
Personally, I love the Quetzalcoatl transmog.
I've been spending all my blood shards today on legs, and I just got my Jade Harvester's Courage.
Nice. Very
Yeah.
nice. I'm at a point where I'm not a great
Well, let's
or a
see.
Fire Stone of Jordan for that build.
My apologies to the people in the Twitch chat. We've been, talking about Witch Doctors, and I've been watching the screen and playing. I just caught a question about some of the big questions that have been coming up. Obviously, PTR. Any comments about PTR? We're still in progress. We do watch all the feedback. Please continue that. One of our gameplay programmers, Kevin, just did the transmog change so that you'd be able to transmog some of your set items,
great.
and so he got that in. Huge thanks to him, and that basically means that you can transmog looks to your set items, and the reason we didn't do it before is because if you put it on a different class, we didn't want to show inappropriate art on a completely different class. Sometimes that art didn't even exist, and so if you do swap the item through your stash, then it just shows up as the base item. And I think that was some of the big things coming out. There's still some changes for Whirlwind Barbs. I actually don't know off the top of my head. I don't think we're not planning like massive sweeping changes at this point. We're iterating on what we have. We're working on the set items. I know that there's some changes on some of like the channel disintegrate skills and some of the monk stuff, and Tempest Rush is being adjusted some more. I don't want to go into specifics, except to say that if it's on PTR and that it's there for testing, and it's not final yet.
I will say I should mention one last bit about Carnival build before we go, which is that one of the challenges anybody's going to face with this is adding AoE damage, to do some area damage, because it's all single target. Now, you can spam darts at a whole mob at once and sort of mow them down, but each hit is a single monster. At lower torment levels, I would highly advocate the use of Acid Rain in particular, as a rune that you can drop to lay down some AoE and then fire a bunch of darts off. One amazing legendary item for a Carnival build that doesn't exist would be if you had, like, say, poison dart gloves that would cause a dart hit to have a chance to spawn a poison nova, for instance. That would take your poison and make it work for you, and then it would also give you the potential of some AoE. And as we know, in a Carnival build, the gloves are the weak slot. So that's a fun idea I've heard. But I will also say that if anybody has questions about Carnival, come on over to the Witch Doctor forums. We have an amazing community, even if we don't have an MVP there yet. And I will personally answer any questions about the build.
Awesome. Guess we have about 2 minutes left. Are there some
Maybe we can sneak a couple more questions in there before
or comments before we?
Sacrifice. I'm very excited for that being changed in PTR.
Oh yeah. Actually, the art just got hooked up for that. Julian Love, one of our lead technical artists, created the art so that the projectile actually changes now based on the dog that you have summoned out. It was always sort of temp and prototypey before, but now it looks fantastic, and it looks just like your dog runs over and explodes at the impact point. So. I'm hoping that opens up a whole new family of builds, particularly with Humunculus, right?
Yeah.
And I think I was looking at it last month. I wanted to make sure that if I had a tall man's finger out and was using sacrifice, that the dog actually exploded 4 more. And there was some aspects of it that were a little bit too OP. I think it was like Tall Man's Finger plus Homunculus plus Sacrifice was, I think we just deemed it a little bit outside reasonable.
Mine was like critting for 36 million.
So it's not like a straight up, you have 6 times as much, like giant dog explosion sacrificing, but it does at least interact in some positive ways.
Awesome. Well, it looks like that we're out of time for today, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks so much for joining us today. Wyatt, thanks for taking time out of your busy day to come and hang out
absolutely.
with
It's very nice to talk with Off Repeated and Thunderclaw.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys were able to make it out. Thanks again to our guests, to Off Repeated and Thunderclaw, for hanging out and playing with us today.
Thanks for submitting the build, Off Repeated.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. There are a lot of people running this, and I'm happy to speak for them for a little while.
Awesome.
It's a lot of
Really
fun.
appreciate that. Remember, if you want to take part in Theorycraft Thursday, be sure to send me your builds to theorycraftthursday@blizzard.com, and we'll take a look and go over them. And we feature a new build every week. And every 4 weeks, you get to vote and see which build wins and gets to join us on stream. So we're really looking forward to seeing your builds in the future. And thanks again for joining us. Bye.